Hey guys, in this episode, we're going to talk about whether Social Security is really on the cusp of closing. But before we do, I want to bring your attention to last week's episode. So if you originally tuned into last week's podcast, it was a full replay of a webinar on strategies for high income earners when it comes to buying a home and the way they differ from your first home purchase. It was a really good webinar with Clint Haynes and Rachel Mays of Preferred Rate. If you go to that episode now, it's a snippet, and that's because we've moved the full replay to a private podcast feed for our email community. This is something that we started just this week. If you're not already in our email community, you can go to newmoneynewproblems.com/subscribe to join our family. And we want to have this private podcast feed to not only hold full-length replays of webinars, but also unreleased episodes we think would be valuable, extended interviews that maybe we'd edited down on the main podcast for length. But this is the place where we're going to start to put some of that information. And again, there's no cost to access it besides your email address. There's no subscription fee. So if you want to have access to that private feed, both now and for future replays, we're going to put some past webinars on there that we've done as well. Once again, you can go to newmoneynewproblems.com/subscribe, and we're going to send out that information for the private feed to our existing members today as well. All right, let's get to this week's episode.
Let's get some money.
From New Money, New Problems, it's the New Money, New Problems podcast, a show for successful professionals searching for the tools they need to navigate financial opportunities and obstacles they've never seen. Negotiating compensation, purchasing your first investment property, helping your family with money, the highs and lows of entrepreneurship. New Money brings new problems that require new solutions. Join us as we work through them together. I'm Brenton Harrison, and this is the New Money, New Problems podcast.
Hello, this is Brenton Harrison of New Money, New Problems, and your host for the New Money, New Problems podcast. If you are like me and you're keeping up with financial news, in addition to all the crazy news that's going on in our world, you may have seen stories in recent weeks about the impending death or closure of Social Security and how it is on path to lose all funds and not be able to pay benefits within the next decade. And this can cause a lot of fear and a lot of confusion, especially if you are like most people who at their current age haven't saved as much as they had hoped. And maybe you're looking at Social Security as, if not the thing that would keep you from being homeless in retirement, at least the thing that would provide some level of security to make sure that you have something to spend on after you stop working. But this is not me overstating things. There have been articles all over the place. If you're looking on screen, there's one from CNBC that says Social Security Retirement Trust Fund may be depleted in less than a decade. Article from the Wall Street Journal that says Americans are claiming Social Security early, fearful of its future. So what is the truth? What is reality? Is this fear mongering? Is it clickbait? Is Social Security really about to close? Well, here's the answer. No. All right, thank you for tuning into this week's episode. I hope that you all, no, I'm joking. We're going to actually have a conversation and flesh this out because to me, I not only want you to have the same level of assurance that I do, that at least in some form or fashion, Social Security will always be around. I also think it would be helpful for you to have a better idea of the system that you've been paying into for all of your working years. So I'm going to talk at the front part of this episode about 3 different things that impact my level of confidence that Social Security will be here to stay. So first, let's start with how do you pay into the system? And interestingly enough, the Social Security tax rate is the same for all people, but not all people pay the same rate in Social Security. That sounds odd, but let me explain what I mean. The Social Security tax rate is 12.4% no matter who you are. If you're in this country, Social Security tax rate is 12.4%. But the amount that you pay depends on whether you work for yourself or whether you're a W-2 employee. You see, if you work for yourself, you're responsible for the entire 12.4%. But if you work for an employer, you only have to pay half being 6.2%, and your company has to pick up the other 6.2% on your behalf. Now, there are different taxes for Medicare and things of that nature, but that's how Social Security taxes work. And unlike the taxes for things like Medicare, not all people pay Social Security taxes on every dollar of their income. You see, Social Security has something called a wage base. And what that means is even though the rate is 12.4%, you only have to pay that 12.4% up to a certain number. In 2025, that number is $176,100. So what this means is somebody who has $75,000 worth of income, they pay that entire 12.4% on the 75 that they earn. But if you have somebody who earns about $365,000, which is about double the Social Security wage-based limit, they technically are only paying Social Security tax on half of their income, the other half being above the wage limit and not subject to that tax. Now, that's not something that you would technically see as fair on the front end, but how it works on the back end is that the person who earns $75,000 and pays Social Security tax on all of their income is likely going to have a larger percentage of that income replaced when they actually start drawing Social Security. Whereas the person who earns double what the Social Security wage base actually is not going to see as large a percentage of their income replaced because they're not paying taxes on as large a percentage of their income. And the way that they calculate benefits is pretty unique, so let's walk through it. The first thing they do is they take all of your years of earnings and they index those years for inflation, meaning that, for example, if you earn $75,000 in 1990, well, that may be the equivalent of earning $125,000 in 2025. So they have to take that income from 1990 and they have to index it for inflation to find what the comparable income would be in today's dollars. Once they have all those years of earnings history, they take the 35 highest paid years and they put all that money in a pot. So let's say that it's $7 million. And they divide that $7 million by 420 months. Why? Because that's the equivalent of 35 years. And what it gives you is what's called your average indexed monthly earnings. Essentially, once you take into consideration inflation, this is the average amount that you earned across your 35 highest paid years. And this is what they use to determine your Social Security benefit. But that's not what you get in Social Security. And this is where it comes into play when I talk about how much of your income is replaced. If you're looking on screen, you're looking at the federal income tax brackets for 2025. And that may be an odd way to open the conversation about how much you get in Social Security. The reason I want to bring this to your attention is because if you've listened to the podcast, we've talked about the fact that we live in a progressive tax bracket. And what that means is all portions of your income are not taxed at the same rate. As a matter of fact, as your income progresses, higher portions of your pay are taxed at higher rates. And the reason that concept is important to understand is Social Security works in a similar way, but in reverse. With Social Security, the lower portions of your pay are replaced at a higher percentage. And as your income progresses, a smaller percentage of those income levels are going to be replaced when it comes to Social Security. As a matter of fact, if you look at the Social Security website, it calls these bend points, different points at which your income percentages are replaced at different levels. And you can see that in 2025, the first $1,226 of a person's earnings are replaced at 90%. Everything they earn from there to $7,391 is replaced at 32%. And everything between that and the Social Security wage base is only replaced at 15%. So the person who earns $75,000 is going to end up with a higher percentage of their monthly income reflected in their Social Security benefit than a person who earns $350,000, which is between $25,000 to $30,000 per month, whereas the maximum Social Security benefit in this year is a little over $4,000 a month. So while the system may not be fair to the person who earns $75,000 on the front end, which is about $6,000 a month, and they have to pay Social Security tax on all of their income, if they end up getting a $2,500 or $3,000 monthly check in Social Security, that's a much bigger replacement percentage than somebody who earned $25,000 to $30,000 in their working years and ends up with a $4,000 check. That's how, in my opinion, the scales even out a bit. And lastly, before the break, let's talk about when you can collect those benefits, and you will see we'll be able to put all these things together to tell you why Social Security will likely be just fine. Staying on the Social Security website, we're looking at age bands based on a person's date of birth. And next to that, you'll see that person's full retirement age. So for example, someone born between 1943 and 1954, their full retirement age is 66. Whereas anybody who's born in 1960 or later, which will be most of the people who listen to this podcast, full retirement age for Social Security is 67. What does full retirement age mean? Well, it means that we just went through this process of calculating your benefit for Social Security, but you only get that full benefit, which is your primary insurance amount, that's the term that they call it, if you wait until your full retirement age to collect benefits. For most people listening to this, as I said, that's 67. but you can collect benefits as early as age 62. But if you do decide to collect benefits early, not only are you not going to get your full primary insurance amount, you could actually have your benefits reduced, even reduced down to zero, by two different tests. First, the test of how early you were when you took your benefits, and second, the test of how much money you were earning while taking those early benefits, which is another episode for another day. And you also can see your benefit increased if you wait. For every year that you wait past your full retirement age, you see an 8% simple increase on your benefit all the way up to age 70. So there are all different ways that calculate and tax and contribute to the Social Security system. And based on your understanding of that ways after the break, we'll tell you why that understanding should give you some assurances that Social Security will be here to stay.
This is the New Money, New Problems podcast, a show for successful professionals searching for the tools they need to navigate financial opportunities and obstacles they've never seen. We'll be right back.
Are you wondering what new money problems you might be overlooking in your financial life? If so, we've got great news. We've crafted the New Money, New Problems Gap Finder to identify potential weaknesses in your finances in areas ranging from budgeting, investments, insurance, and even the threat your extended family's finances could pose to your household. Please head to newmoneynewproblems.com/gapfinder to complete it today. Again, that's newmoneynewproblems.com/gapfinder to take the assessment.
You're listening to the New Money, New Problems podcast. Subscribe now at newmoneynewproblems.com. Welcome back.
All right, welcome back from the break. Let's use your newfound understanding and the very fear-mongering articles themselves to establish that confidence that I promised you. If you're looking on screen at the article we started all of this with, Social Security Retirement Trust Fund may be depleted in less than a decade. That is technically accurate, but if you keep reading, it will not only tell you how this has been handled in the past, because it has occurred in the past, it will also bring all those factors to the forefront to tell you what options they have to make sure that this doesn't occur. It says that even if the trust fund reserve was depleted, the Social Security would still be able to pay 77% of the benefits. Why is that the case? It's because the overwhelming majority of the funds that Social Security uses to pay benefits comes from the year-to-year tax receipts they take from your paycheck. That's 6.2% from the W-2 employees and 12.4% from the independent contractors and business owners. So it's very comforting to me to know that even if there's $0 in that reserve, just based on the receipts that they receive year over year, over 75% of what's needed is already payable. We're just trying to make sure that we cover the additional 23%. And you will find that there have been ways in the past that this has occurred. What's one of those ways? Well, let's go back to the article. Social Security's combined trust funds, the Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund and the Disability Insurance Trust Fund, will have enough revenue to pay scheduled benefits until 2034. Current law prohibits joining those funds. However, Congress has authorized shifting of these funds in the past where there have been trust fund shortfalls, end quote. What are they saying? They're saying that inside of that reserve, there's two different funds. There's the Old Age and Survivors Fund and the Disability Fund. And while technically you're not supposed to move money from one to the other, it has happened in the past. You may see it as robbing Peter to pay Paul. I see it as, hey, if you only need $15 for this fund over here, but you have $25 set aside, and for the other fund, you need $20, but you only have $15 set aside. There have been times in the past when Congress has shifted money from one fund to the other to make sure that people get their benefits. But thankfully, that's not the only option. Going down in the article, it says Social Security's trust funds help pay for benefits when more money is needed in addition to ongoing revenue from payroll taxes. Right here in the article that started off so fear-mongery, they say that they are using payroll taxes to cover most of this need. Later on, it says to shore up Social Security and Medicare's trust fund, Congress may raise taxes, cut benefits, or a combination of both. This goes back to our understanding from the beginning of the episode. Right now, workers pay 6.2% of their pay towards Social Security. And if you're saying, well, I don't want to pay more in taxes, I'm pretty sure you would rather pay 6.5% as compared to 6.2% if the alternative was losing some of your benefits in Social Security. And that's reflected later on because it says, and I quote, a recent survey found 85% of Americans would rather raise taxes than cut benefits, according to the National Academy of Social Insurance, AARP, the National Institute on Retirement Security, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which held that survey with 2,200 Americans. So most people are going to say, yeah, 6.5% or 7% is not that much difference from 6.2 if it means that I have the guarantee of getting this benefit. And I would say that it is less palatable for a congressperson or a senator to say, hey, instead of raising that tax incrementally, we're going to choose to cut the benefits of people who have paid into this program. I would argue it's far more likely that they raise the taxes a bit. We also covered on the table with Social Security the full retirement age, and you'll see that over the years, it has crept up bit by bit. There was a period of time where you had to be 66 or 65. Now, for most people, it's 67. And this is something that they could say, hey, instead of being 67, you have to be 67 in 2 months, 67 in 4 months. And at the time that Social Security was created, I can tell you there were not as many people working into their 60s as there are now. And again, one of the ways that they can shore up the program is to add an additional 2 months, which would mean that not only are you waiting longer to access the funds, which means that they don't have to pay out as much. It also means that they're collecting taxes on your pay for a longer period of time, which adds more to the fund itself and increases the solvency that you're seeing with Social Security. So the long and short of this is Social Security is not going anywhere. As much craziness as you're seeing in the news, the two things that have held true is when it comes to cutting money, no matter what you see online, the places that they are least likely to cut are Social Security and Medicare. And if you're saying, no, that's not true, I see them cutting it on the news, that's Medicaid, which speaks to whether we take care of people who are less than in this country when it comes to an income perspective. But Social Security and Medicare are the two things that they are least likely to touch, which combined with the factors of the option of raising taxes or increasing the age or changing benefit calculations, make me very, very confident that this program is here to stay, regardless of what you might see on the news. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I also hope that if you have not already, you'll sign up for our email list at newmoneynewproblems.com/subscribe, not only to get up-to-date information on what we're doing as a firm and information you need to know, but also to access the private podcast feed with those exclusive resources that we hope benefit your financial life. I'll see you next week.
From New Money, New Problems, this was the New Money, New Problems podcast, a show for successful professionals searching for the tools they need to navigate financial opportunities and obstacles they've never seen.